we've been in our e-commerce space, we've been really lucky in the last probably couple of years through COVID. While others were doing it really tough, e-commerce brands and clothing brands like ours were growing rapidly. So we were lucky. And then the downturn this year, we really wouldn't have been able to probably get through it without Wayflyer. They've been really flexible in a period that was really difficult for us, especially earlier this year with the downturn and the current economic climate. It's been tough, and yeah, we probably couldn't have got through it without them.
Hi everyone, so welcome to the Wayflyer Founder Series. I'm Paul Waddy. I'm a strategic advisor at Wayflyer and an e-commerce advisor. I'm also the author of Shopify for Dummies and Selling Online for Dummies. I'm really excited about today's chat in the Founders Series. We've got Charlie Hender from ortc Clothing Co. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And I want to start by just getting the background of how you started ortc, and I'm always interested in what you were up to before you were doing that, because I find there's often a really interesting backstory. There's often a failure before the good one. So I'm keen to sort of know how you found your way into a clothing business. I'm from an apparel background too, so
yeah.
I'm very excited to hear how you got into that and how you found your way to founding ortc.
It's a long story. So do you want the long one or the short-term version? But like a long story short, I guess, we as I was saying to you off camera, that Will and I started this back in 2016, and it came about we were knocking about after uni and on weekends and stuff and hanging out a bit. We were sort of acquaintances through school, and I think we just found a similar interest for probably not enjoying uni all that much and wanting to find something else. You know, we were both, I think all of our mates were going through uni, probably doing a little bit better than us, and we were sort of just doing it for the sake of it, I think. And somehow, I mean, it was through that 21st period in our life, we were going to lots of 21st parties, and we just somehow came up with the idea one Sunday that, we should start a business, and that business we should start selling ties and accessories. And for some reason, that was just such a good idea, and we actually followed up on it, and that was in about April of 2016, and we just pursued that. And through a few connections, Will had a connection that basically introduced us to Alibaba, which we'd never heard of. And that was just so fascinating to us, because we had literally no skills when we started this. We had no design background. We had a love of clothing, but we had no experience in any of this industry. We had no idea about e-commerce, wholesale, retail, whatever it be. We were just going in completely blind, but we were kind of just determined, I think. And I think that's how we made it work. I mean, all those years ago, we just started selling ties and accessories, and you sort of fast forward 6 years, and somehow we've got here and we're selling, clothing, swimwear to men, women, kids. And I mean, we've got a long way to go, but we're sort of starting to become the lifestyle brand that we always wanted to be. I think now the only thing that's probably holding us back is we just need a bit more time to actually execute what we want to. But that's kind of how it started. I mean, as far as how we really got into it, I mean, both of our mothers were come from sort of a retail background, just privately owned retail stores, and maybe we got our love of clothing and fashion from them. I think you could probably argue that, but we certainly had no experience when we were going into it. So
that's awesome. Just browsing the website while you're chatting.
Yeah.
Great website, really slick user experience, and the product looks amazing and really well priced. So
thank you.
I got my eye on a few. Father's Day coming up this weekend, so I might just subtly pass these across to my wife.
Yeah, well, I'll sort you out, mate. But that is our brand, though, right? Like sometimes, I mean, I think in the first few years, especially when you are inexperienced, you just don't really know probably who you are. We always had an idea. I think I always had a really strong idea of who we we're going to be, or who we wanted to be. But when you don't have experience and probably don't have, the skill set in lots of those areas, you just don't really know how to get there. So you make it up as you go, and eventually you just get a little bit better. And like, as I said before, we're still not there. I still think we've got a really long way to go, but we're definitely sure of who we are now, which, 2 years ago, we probably weren't that sure. We were selling product and doing well. The business was ticking along, but as like from a brand point of view, we probably just weren't as sure of who we are. But you look at our website now, like, we're a very clean brand. Our designs are very classic and timeless. I mean, I like to think we're just a modern take on the classics. I mean, that's what I've always thought. There's hints of sort of, that East Coast America in there, like Polo Ralph Lauren. But I think we've also got some clean sort of elements like Assembly Label and Country Road. And if you sort of bundle all of those together, you get us. But the one thing we've always tried to do, and we did this even from the start, one of the phrases we used to use was a brand for our friends and our fathers. We wanted to be able to like encapsulate all of those people. We weren't sure how to do it because we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves as like a dad brand or a kid brand. Somehow that's evolved, and it's probably just through the designs, I think, and probably through the simplicity of us. We're very classic, and I think that appeals to lots of people, both young and old. I mean, we wore that type of clothing as kids, and I dare say we'll still be wearing this kind of clothing when we're in our 40s and 50s.
Yeah, I can see that. It's got wide appeal, I think, and it's a really simplistic and minimalist design. So I think it's great. And it looks like you're catering for different occasions. You've got the loungewear. You've got, I think in apparel, the occasions are important. And you've got you've got obviously beach, you've got linen, you've got home, you've got stuff to wear out. It's great. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, well, I feel like we're ticking some boxes. One of the things this is both Will and I have always been really strong on this because quality has always been our thing, right? Like, quality is like what we care about. Our customer comes first, but quality is right there with it. And that's one thing we've always worked really hard on, and we've tried to go through this whole thing. We've tried to go category by category. If we're ever doing something, we'll focus on a category instead of, if we got $500,000 on day one of this business, we've always said that we wouldn't be here because we would have just gone and bought products that weren't up to scratch in a really wide range of categories, and we probably would have gone under. So we've really tried to look at each category in isolation and just try and perfect it in our eyes. I mean, it might not be perfect in everyone's eyes, but we think we do a pretty good job. And swimwear is probably a really good example of that. We've got a swim collection and we're about to release a new range. And part of that is the swimwear in itself could definitely, be its own brand. We feel like it's strong enough there. If we could build out that range, it's a really strong category for us. It's not just a tap on. And we never wanted to be that. We never wanted to have categories that were just add-ons. We wanted them to be put a lot of energy and focus onto, so that we could actually sell them.
You've nailed something there for me. So when I work with apparel brands, I think expanding into categories is one of the best ways to grow revenue, but done in a strategic way. And I think too many businesses add products and they just find their way onto the website, but they're not released as collections or capsules, and they're not marketed as capsules and collections. And I think what you said there about you feel your swim is almost strong enough to be on its own, and that's how a collection should be launched and should be marketed, as its own big thing and its own content strategy and its own marketing. And I think that's evident to me in your whole website. I think it's broken out and segmented into collections really nicely. And you've done.
I'm glad you noticed, mate, because we put a lot of time into that. But and I mean, there's obviously lots of other categories we want to add on, but obviously in new categories, typically you got to front up a lot of money to to the scale that we're doing now. You just it's a big investment. Every category you go into is a big investment, so you want to be getting it right. So there's obviously, we're probably a few years away from having the stuff that we really want in there. We want to get into more bottoms and pants and shorts, etc., which will be coming next year. But yeah, our focus has always really been on, let's try and market and sell the categories that we've got and do it really well, because it's just, I think it's just nature just to want more. Like, even as a business, like, we're always sitting here being like, we just want more, more, more. But sometimes it's important just to sit back and actually, let's focus on the products that we've got, because they're damn good products, but we've got to be able to market and sell these products so that we can go and do the stuff we want to do next.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think
yeah.
that's really good advice for anybody listening. And you've obviously started at a certain point and grown out your inventory range and your product range and so on. And we're here on the Wayflyer Founder Series. How did you come across Wayflyer, and what brought you to start working with those guys?
We spoke to Wayflyer probably, I think, 6 to 12 months ago, when they were sort of first coming onto the scene. I know they've been around probably a bit longer than that, but that's when we sort of had first connection with them. And at the time, we didn't really need them, as we'd always had a good facility from the traditional lenders, which has always just been a stock facility. So no, it's, sort of to help throughout your cash flow, but it's mainly focused around paying the suppliers to get the deposits on orders started, and getting that going, which has been fantastic. Like, cannot knock that at all. Very traditional style, not an overdraft, but and that was working for us at the time. So we thought we probably didn't need it at that point. And it wasn't until probably at the start of this year where we sort of thought to ourselves, e-commerce is growing. We need a more flexible way to repay this money, when we're doing, and we probably need to support our e-commerce business. We need money that we can tap into quickly, that just comes out of our Shopify sales, that we can pump back through ad spend and those sorts of things, so that we can actually scale up our ads without, taking away from the cash that's in our bank, sort of our security cash. And so that's how that got started. And probably, I think it was in November last year, we thought, like, that's such a cool idea. Like, how are more people not doing this? And even though we didn't tap into it then, we didn't really realize we needed it until early this year, especially when we started to face some other challenges just around delays on stock and, all those kinds of things. But our e-commerce was still heading in the right direction. And that's what it was for us, is that we just needed a more flexible repayment term and a better way to pay back the money, that so that we just didn't need to be doing the forced saving ourselves, which is traditionally how we'd been doing it. But I think the best part about Wayflyer is they get the e-commerce space. Lots of people don't, because it's moving so quickly. But to be able to repay that from the sales that you're doing online every day at, I think ours is about 20-25%. You just do not feel it. But it gave us the biggest kickstart, and it allowed us to get right in front and really scale up our ad spend. And even in the last few months, there's no surprises. We've gone, I think month on month, the last few months, we've been up about 100K on the 3 months previous per month. So, like, we're going through a really strong growth phase at the moment, despite the current climate as well. We're still heading in the right direction. Things have definitely slowed off a bit as to where they were last year, but yeah, it's just such a flexible option.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're touching on a few things that I'm hearing a lot from Wayflyer customers, flexibility, and it sounds like, I mean, I love the idea as well that this the take of the daily sales really takes the stress of paying back finance away from the business owner and lets them focus on running the business, knowing that the payments are just taken out and the payments scale up as the revenue scales down, and accordingly when the revenue scales up, and then when the revenue is not as great, the repayments are less, which I think is just takes away a bit of that stress. So is that one of the key reasons that you enjoy using Wayflyer, is that flexibility and the repayments and the just sort of taking that away from you in a respect?
Yeah, 100%, because it's so, and not to say that traditional, methods don't work for others, because they have worked clearly, but this is so sustainable. That's what I think. It's just such a sustainable measure, and it's kind of tailored for the small guy and the big guy. I mean, taking a percentage of daily sales will suit almost everyone. in my opinion. Like, it's every business is a bit different. I understand that, and everyone's margins are different, but that flexibility allows you, it frees up so much money, and not having the stress to be for saving that money, to be putting that away to then repay on a certain day. It's definitely the flexibility that it just makes it a winner.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I like the idea that it's paying back as you go, and before you know it, you've paid it off and you can go again. Whereas some of the other traditional finance mobs, it's sort of the money's there, you repay it in one big lump sum, and then you're kind of hamstrung a little bit when you need to outlay on ads or inventory or so on. And the other thing that keeps coming back to me when I talk to people about Wayflyer is the fact that they're actually founded by e-commerce people. Having spoken to Jack, one of the founders, last week, he was telling me all about his e-commerce background, and I think that really shines through, is that they get the space, they understand it, they're comfortable lending with it because they understand the industry. Do you think that's the case?
100%. Because when we first spoke to them, that's exactly what we took from it, is that these guys get it. Like, that we didn't have to jump through a million hoops to get there. It was very clear cut, and the whole process, like, it was actually a really quick process. They plug into your store, check what you're doing in Rev, check a few of the other typical, the general stuff, and then within a few days you just get the tick of approval. But they also were very clear to us, like, this is what we think would lend you first up, and that sounds perfect, and if you pay it back quicker, that's great, and then like you said, you can go again. So, and then once you have a relationship there with them, from our point of view, it just feels like it'll be an ongoing thing, because we could easily sit there and just try and stay the same and do the same every year and be really profitable, but that's obviously not our goal. We want to continue to grow, and to grow, you need money, and if you don't have investment, you need to borrow that money from somewhere. So having a really flexible option like Wayflyer is the key.
So, Charlie, you've obviously gone through some good growth there, and you nailed it. I mean, a lot of despite the macro factors out there, a lot of retailers are struggling at the moment. You're still growing. If someone's listening to this and sort of thinking, well, I don't need finance, or it's not for me, what are some of the things that you would suggest retailers, or online retailers in particular, should be thinking about when considering finance? Is it larger orders? Is it taking advantage of high-performing marketing channels? Is it expanding into new categories? What are some things that good, clever online retailers could do with finance?
It's a good question, because it's sometimes, I feel like, and it's a good thing to think about in advance, because even from our point of view, it's always felt like we need it yesterday. When we start having the discussion about it, it's like, we need this, like, and we should have done more planning. We should have got on the front foot and thought about this earlier on. And all of a sudden, without that, and everyone would know that if you're having cash flow issues in particular while you're trying to grow, it's just the flow-on effect that has down the line. Like, especially with us, as we have a wholesale business to support as well. And if those cash flow issues, come up, which they do, it then impacts so many other areas of your business. Orders are delayed. Freight times are blowing out at the moment. It takes longer to get product here. Therefore, it takes longer to get the revenue in, the money in the bank. And that's why I think a lot of forward planning is a great thing to do. And then if you're looking at how you can actually spend that money and what you can do with it, I think what we've done with that money, and I think this is probably the wisest thing, is to invest that money back into stock, into good stock. And then it's been good for us, because we've been able to actually sit on a buffer amount of money in the bank, just a bit of security cash, and have this money to then support our e-commerce channels through Facebook ads, TikTok ads, etc. And that's the best thing about it, because sometimes with traditional lenders, you're not able to use the funds for ads. You're not able to use it for other cash flow management. It's sometimes purely for stock, and the flexibility of this is probably the best part about it.
Yeah, good advice. And I think as well, you're talking about a buffer of cash and a buffer of inventory. And I always talk about having 10 to 12 weeks of spare cash. And what you're talking about is really valid, and I think a good lesson for retailers to make sure you have that buffer of cash and don't leave it too late, because finance is not a naughty word. Finance is, growing businesses need funds. That's part of it. It's not we're running out of money or we're desperate. It's we're growing. We need the money for bigger inventory orders. We need the money to expand our reach through TikTok, through Facebook. And it's really important that I think online retailers look at finance in the right way as an opportunity. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with bootstrapping your way to success. Charlie, have you considered other forms of finance? Have you considered private equity, things like this? If there is someone listening to this thinking about maybe taking on private equity, going to the big banks, what advice would you have for people looking at other forms of finance?
Well, I've always thought, and I don't want to, I'll just give you my thoughts on it, but I like to, because there's every one of those options can be good for for different businesses. There's no right or wrong answer. And I agree, there's sometimes a bit of a stigma around finance. It's a bit of a scary thing, but the reality is you can't really grow without it unless you get investment, or there's no really other way around it. So, but from that point of view, I think that it's probably important just to have that discussion, especially internally, and work out what the right fit is for us, because we've had all of those discussions. We've used traditional finance and still do, because it works. That part of it works great for a part of our business. But from an e-commerce point of view, the Wayflyer model works perfectly for our e-commerce business because of the flexibility around being able to use that money on, various things, not just stock, not just ads. You can use it on all of those things to make that e-commerce platform, work better. So for us, like, we've actually, to all of those three things that you've just mentioned, we've kind of tapped into them. So there's no right or wrong, but definitely from the e-commerce point of view, that suits our model best because of the way they plug into our Shopify store, those flexible repayment terms and stuff. It just makes it's like a no-brainer. And we've weighed them all up against each other, and we've kind of tested all of them, and that one works best for our e-commerce business.
That's a really good point, and something that some of the other founders have said is they rigorously do their homework, and Wayflyer comes out in a really positive light. And I've definitely had and we know that people do their homework, particularly when it comes to finance. So you researched other options thoroughly. You've used other options, but you've determined that Wayflyer is the right option for a growing e-commerce business.
Because the last we've been, in our e-commerce space, we've been really lucky in the last probably couple of years. Through COVID, while others were doing it really tough, e-commerce brands and clothing brands like ours were growing rapidly. So we were lucky. And then the downturn this year, we really wouldn't have been able to probably get through it without Wayflyer. They've been really flexible, and in a period that was really difficult for us, especially earlier this year with the downturn and the current economic climate. It's been tough, and we probably couldn't have got through it without them.
Well, that's so good. And it's great to hear that they're playing a really important role in your growth. Charlie, what do you think's next for your brand? You've got a multi-channel or an omni-channel business. You've got retail, you've got wholesale, you've got online retail. Are you doing any export? Have you thought about that?
So we've obviously got the online. We've got a retail space too, with a new store opening soon, and then wholesale, online, retail. We've also got a custom business, which is custom by ortc. That's a separate business altogether, but it's basically a full service customer merchandise business. Like, we sort of sell it as merchandise done differently. So instead of the daggy old, merchandise clothing that you get from any uniform shop, this is ortc quality and style, but with your logo on it. So we've got that going on as well. We did, through 2019, we were doing a bit of stuff to the US. So we did the trade show scene there for a couple of years, which was good. But I think the biggest thing we took away from that was just us getting ahead of ourselves. And after that, we came home, and it was good timing really, because COVID hit. And the start of COVID was obviously really scary for everyone. And it just allowed us to sit back and really focus on what we're doing here, because we sort of realized that, hang on, we're just not even scratching the surface in Australia, to be perfectly honest. And there's just so much opportunity here. So we thought, we're not going to look back overseas until we've at least shored up what we're doing here. And we're getting there. We're not too far away. I think next year we'll get back over to the US and do the trade show scene there for wholesale, and crank up the e-commerce stuff there again as well. So just baby steps though, because I think in the past we probably got a bit ahead of ourselves, I reckon, and just tried to do too much too soon. And it just ends up taking away from something else, especially when you've got a really small team. So
for anyone listening, I think that's really good advice. There are a lot of Aussie e-com brands that do pretty well in the US, but there are also a lot that go a little bit early. In my opinion, before Australia's maxed out, even close to being maxed out, or New Zealand for that matter as well. And I think it's really sound advice to just take stock and nail what you're good at. And I'm a big believer in the ICE score, methodology, which is to tackle the high impact projects, but the ones you have the most confidence, which is the C in the ICE acronym, high level of confidence with the least amount of effort. And the confidence and effort factor in the US can often be quite difficult. And I think, brands have got good clothing brands can get, well north of 10, 20, 30, $40 million a year in Australia before really needing to worry too much about the US, which typically attracts a lower conversion rate. You need to spend more money. Obviously, it's a great nut to crack, but a tough one.
Of course.
Nailing your local market is really good advice, and I think that's
and it's funny though, isn't it? Because you hear that, and we heard that for literally the first 5 years, and people would always say to us, like, just don't get too far ahead of yourself, and just don't get too big too quick, and just focus on what you're good at. And you sort of just roll your eyes, yeah, sure. But sure enough, 6 years on, we literally, that was our conversation that we had at the start of the year, was we need to consolidate this, and we just need to get back in front and really get on top of what we're doing. And then we can look at replicating that elsewhere. But like you said, like, there's so much opportunity here. We think Australia, and it is 20 million people, 25 million people. It is small compared to some other countries around the world, but that's still a lot of people to sell to. So that's definitely that's what this whole year's been about for us, is really consolidating, getting back in front and shoring up what we're actually doing here, so that we actually have some money in the bank to go and do those other things that we want to do in new markets. So
yeah, great advice. Australia is not big, but it's big enough to do some pretty serious revenue. And in terms of product, what other categories or collections have you got your eye on? I can see you're doing socks and hats and things like that. Where do you think you'll diversify that into?
Yeah, well, we've always had the gifts and accessories, so because we kind of started in that. So even for a wholesale point of view, we separate that a bit. So we try and indent the clothing. The gifts and accessories just run all year round and are really popular. But I think we've tapped into some women's wear, and I mean, the majority of our customers these days are women. Always kind of have been, because buying for men. But we just want to keep broadening that women's area as well. We just probably need a bit more support in the design area, which we're sort of working through at the moment. But from a men's point of view, I think we just want to pick the low-hanging fruit. And some of the simple things for us to do next is just to get into some simple bottoms and stuff, like I was saying before, to complete our outfits. So next year we'll be doing some more knitwear, like chino style pants, shorts, those kind of things. And then just building out the ranges that we're doing currently, like improving our linen, improving our swim, and just being able to release those with a full collection, because that's probably something we haven't done perfectly at the moment. We just get we're probably a bit under resourced, and it takes us a bit too long to get things together. And then nothing's ever perfect, and you're harsh markers. You know, if you're an owner, you're a harsh marker, and you just want it to be better. So, but we're definitely getting there, and I think that a couple of those categories is probably what you're going to see next if we can get it right.
Yeah, and I think, thinking again of somebody listening to this who might be starting an online business or a fashion brand or whatever, what are some of the things that you think a new e-commerce business needs to look out for, particularly at this difficult time, but also knowing what you know about having started a business? What are some common mistakes?
It's funny, isn't it? Because someone even asked that the other day, and if we were doing this again, would you do it differently? Well, yes, I'd do a million things differently, but I'd never change it for the world, because we've got to where we are, and it's all going fine. But there's just so much. You just make so many mistakes along the way, but you learn from them, and you actually become a bit of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But we're okay with that, because you've got a bit of a line of sight on every sort of area, which is good. But I think the most important thing, I've always thought this, is product. Now, sometimes you come across people who can just market really well, or just have some really niche products or niche designs or something like that. But from my point of view, and for the clothing space and what we're trying to do, it's always been product and quality, because at least when you're selling that, you're going to get them back. And that's one of the most important things, especially in the e-commerce space these days, is customer retention and holding on to them. And it's really hard to do that with a bad product. So, my advice would be to put time into the product. And the best thing, we were lucky because we studied in accessories. So probably some of our mistake came through accessories, and they make up a very small part of someone's wardrobe. So no one ever really had a bad experience with that. And they were also cheap mistakes, because accessories are, socks are pretty cheap to make. If you're doing, a $200,000 clothing order, you'd probably hope there's not too many mistakes in there. Yeah. So that's definitely I think that's the most important thing, outside of, really nurturing your customers and forming a community around your brand. I just think that the most important thing, definitely for us, has always been product and quality.
I love that advice, Charlie. And the reason that I love that advice is that, in my opinion, too many e-commerce businesses look at paid media as their strategy, and product that drives sales. It's interesting product, it's good quality product, and product is by far the greater lever for growing revenue. And good marketing should supplement a good product strategy, not the other way around.
Yeah, I also have a lot of respect for people who can just market anything, and there's a lot of them out there who are just really good at it, and they probably just might not have stumbled across the right product yet, or whatever it might be. But definitely, from our point of view, it has always been, let the marketing support this beautiful product to show people, because and that's the thing, it's very easy to sell a product that you really believe in. I mean, it's just so much easier to do. So that's definitely...
You've got a lot of goodwill around the brand, I think. You've got a lot of reviews. You've got good engagement. I mean, again, for somebody starting out, you don't always have to throw massive dollars at, Facebook and Meta and Instagram, do you? There are some basics that really need to be covered as well. And I think, things like you've got a big focus on over 30,000 happy customers. And again, that's another easy one. Keep the customer happy, and they'll come back and then use their reviews. Is that something that you put front of mind?
That is the biggest thing. And in fact, Will, my business partner, is probably he's a bigger driver of that than me. But because product's probably more my area, he does a bit more of the sales stuff. So, but just keeping the customer happy. We don't care. We'll never be that brand that doesn't refund the shipping because it arrived late. We just couldn't care. We will always go above and beyond just to make them happy, because we know that the product will be good. So if the product's going to be good, you don't want to let them down in some other way that's just completely avoidable. So that's definitely, I think, outside of product, you've just got to keep your customer happy and be a brand that they want to come back to and support. And that's one thing that we've, And it's even something that we're working on at the moment, is like just trying to form more of a community around our brand, just so that people want to come back and buy from us, you know, showing that we're real people, that we actually show up to work, and we've got a really great team here who work really hard to produce really nice clothes for people. And that's what we're trying to showcase more and more, because that resonates with people and they want to continue to support that, especially if they're getting a good experience while doing it.
Yeah, and that's showing through in the reviews that I'm reading here. And I think that it's not necessarily that expensive to look after a customer, is it?
Not really. And I mean, that's the thing. I just think it's such an easy thing, but I still think it's something that there'd be plenty of people out there that miss that. Like you often hear people having a bad experience with something. You just think, how can that happen? And I'm sure there's always people who slip through the cracks. There's probably been a couple of people who have a bad experience, but we will always, and internally the message is to always go above and beyond to make them happy.
That's great. I think that's excellent advice. I wanted to, we're sort of going okay for time, and we'll get to get to a close soon. But I did want to touch on marketing just quickly, because so much has changed in the last year or so, and it's probably a little more expensive to get cut through on paid media channels. And some of those brands that have been way too dependent on paid media channels are starting to struggle. Have you seen changes in the way paid media particularly is used, or how it's performing? And what are some things that you guys might be doing at ORTC to sort of combat the rising costs of paid media and so on?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's we didn't probably realize how good we had it 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago, through that early COVID period. The changes over the last year or so, and on top of that, how competitive it's becoming. And we've definitely felt that as well. So I think for us, though, that's what you just said then was we've never put all of our eggs in one basket. So we've never just purely run ads through Facebook. We've obviously done everything, but that's also been supported by really strong CRM processes and nurturing those customers through email, SMS, Facebook community groups, whatever it may be. But we've also got a big wholesale business as well, which supports our online business, allows them to go into other stores and have a good experience as well. So I just think through that period, especially 12 months ago, pre those sort of iOS 14 updates, but we discussed it, like how important it has been to have our eggs not all put in one basket, and to have a few different revenue streams, not just focus on one channel, focus on them all and look at it a bit more holistically. It's been difficult though, because, you know, I think having the clarity that you used to get from stuff like Facebook ads and how clear that used to be to you, it's definitely become a bit challenging. But I think we've just learned to sort of live with it, and we just look at it a bit more holistically now, and support that through, you know, user generated content, influencer marketing campaigns and stuff as well. But you know, it's probably no different to Facebook advertising. Everything just seems to be getting more expensive at the moment. So but that's why it's good, even in the influencer space. It's just great to be able to form more relationships so that you've got something to continue to go back to, because that can be a really expensive undertaking as well if you don't have a good strategy. So
absolutely, yeah, I like the focus on CRM in particular and the organic channels. Charlie, I like to ask people who are using Shopify, do you have a favorite Shopify app?
Favorite Shopify app? We've got a lot of them.
Could be across anything. Could be across email or ads or CRM, anything that plugs into Shopify.
Well, I think that there's Klaviyo would definitely be our favorite, because that's just what we use so much. But on top of that, there's obviously lots of other good plugins we use. Some of those that are just help the website, but we definitely value for money. I mean, it's getting more expensive, but Klaviyo does its job. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Tick for Klaviyo there.
Yeah.
Well, we're probably gonna wrap up now, but Charlie, I wanted to ask you, and then before we close out, I wanted to, I guess, we're going to get people listening to this who are, have heard of Wayflyer. They could be doing 50, 60, 70 million bucks a year, or some of them are doing close to 200 million. They could be starting out. What advice or recommendations would you give for somebody who's weighing up Wayflyer or wanting to look at finance?
I would give them this advice. I would tell them that if you want flexible, fast repayment terms, stress-free as well, without having to jump through a million hoops to get there, Wayflyer is the answer. That is genuinely how we feel as well. It was so easy. I just thought this is the easiest process ever. And, we paid ours back quite quickly, our first one back quite quickly. And we thought, yeah, we're going to go hard this next few months through our ad campaign. So we'll tap into some more again just to support that. So,
yeah, well, that's why I love it as well. I've got so many clients who are starting to use Wayflyer, and the feedback is always good. Like, it's always for growth. It's always responsible lending. So it's really good to hear that Wayflyer are playing an important part in the growth of ORTC. It's so nice to hear you speak like that, honestly, about them. Charlie, that's probably it for time. So,
good
Charlie,
on you, mate.
from ORTC, I wanted to thank you for coming on the Wayflyer Founder Series. It's awesome to hear about your growth. I think you're 6 years in now. I look forward to what the next 6 years holds for you guys.
Appreciate it, Paul. Good on you.
Cool. Thanks, mate.